Hi everyone, my name is Kat Savage and I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and wellbeing expert working in the creative arts sector. In my line of work, I get to meet some amazing, colourful people, from actors to artists, people who live their lives by their own rules, fueled by passion and determination to bring their unique talents into the world. I wanted to discover what it took for people to leave the usual 9 to 5 and hop on a dream, to capture their bravest moments and share these meaningful conversations with you, so that together we can explore the ideas, emotions, and moments that could potentially change our lives too. The Brave Moment podcast starts now, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, probably the bravest moment not only for my guests, but for the whole world. So let's keep talking, have some fun, and enjoy the show. This week on the show, we welcome award-winning poet and MC Jason Vegas Butler. Jason has been slamming the world with his wordsmithing skills for the past 2 decades, performing everywhere from the stages at Glastonbury Festival to the BBC Urban Music Awards. He's won slam contests, headlined spoken word events, written for film, recently became a finalist in the 2020 National Outspoken Poetry Competition, and is currently in the process of releasing his first poetry collection, Miscellany of One, through Slate Publications, and has just released a new album of original material with his band Antimatador. It is with great pleasure that I introduce you to this tour de force of literary genius, Mr. Jason Vegas Butler.
So I'll start with this one. It's called Oliver, which makes perfect sense once you hear it. Nationwide, the voices implore, "Please, sir, can I have some more?" I've heard those words before. I said them on stage at a young age, learned by rote off the page, performed in primary and secondary by some odd twist of fate. A scene of make-believe, Dow Dickensian misery as prelude to a song. Food, glorious food. Let's all sing along. It's just a play, a dolorous diversion, a desperate discourse on a distant age. The starving poor put in their place, a spoon of gruel slopped on their plates, as Bumble pats his fatted waist. It was the 80s, just after they took away the free milk, crushed the unions, sold off the utilities, privatised for profit and sold altruism to the lowest bidder. But even then, we still had free dinners. But now, I'm not sure how, but most of us missed it. They've brought the workhouse back to life, an inch by inch stealthy heist. Lower the wage and raise the price. Squeeze the monetary vice. No more mask of Mr. Nice. Bumble's back with chubby chums. Across the track from grubby slums, they ladle out the gravy boat. The working poor barely afloat. Millstones tether, debts still rise as Etonites avert their eyes. Divvy up the coffers, award themselves a raise, revel in the great return to Tory glory days of red-faced indignation at the greedy, starving poor who dare to show the temerity of, "Please, sir, can I have some more?"
That was wonderful. Welcome to the show, Jason Vegas Butler.
Thank you for having me.
So, I have to tell you, listeners, this man is a creative in every sense of the word. He's a digital creative making games and speaking internationally on the power of games in learning. You reached the finals of the National 2020 Outspoken Poetry Prize. You're an MC in Gert Biggin, playing all over the Southwest to make it into the finals of the televised BBC Urban Music Awards in London. You've played Glastonbury a few times in various capacities. I mean, you're a creative through and through, aren't you?
It's in my blood, in my DNA. I think that's my biggest driving force is being creative in whatever I'm doing.
I love that. I mean, how did you discover your art for the spoken word?
Well, I guess when I was small, I used to love writing. I wrote poems from when I was 10 upwards. I wrote a poem for once my mum on her Mother's Day card, which she then sent into the local paper, and then that was the Maidenhead Advertiser back when I was 10. And they made a little photograph of a little boy holding a pen and a pad. and then put the poem underneath it. And reading back, it was bloody awful. But it showed that I didn't care. I just always like to put words together. And then it was through when I started listening to the hip hop back in the 80s when that came across the pond. And I loved to listen to rap and listen to how they sort of structured a verse and weaved a story and made these internal rhymes and used couplets and stuff. That really inspired me to start writing. And that really sort of influenced my writing style when I was a kid.
That's really cool. I mean, talking of, hip hop and stuff, who were your inspirations back then?
The first thing that inspired me was I listened to a tape called the EP05, which was a Street Sounds collection, which is like a little compilation. They went up to Street Sounds 15 or something, but Street Sounds EP05 had this one track on it called Fast Life. This is like a story rap about a kid who went off the tracks and became like a drug dealer. And then also on that was loads of other little songs, and I learned every single one of them by rote. I just had it on my BMX, floating across me on the crossbar, riding around, just blaring it out, just learning all these raps. And after that, I sort of loved listening to hip hop, but at the same time, I wasn't those sort of people who you said, repeat the lyrics from this song. I couldn't do that. It just inspired me to have this internal dialogue all the time. So I started thinking about things in a certain rhythm and a certain rhyme. So then I would go home and write my little raps and little scrapbooks. I remember when I was, 11 or 12, I wrote a track about drink driving. I wasn't a drinker, but I just and then I started off with these sound effects, like clinking milk bottles together, and all right, son, driving home, I'll be fine, and all this sort of stuff. And then for scratch noises, I got two cassettes and scratched the corrugated edges together because I didn't have decks or anything back then. Yeah, so it's just whatever you have to hand, that's what you use to create with. So, and that's been my ethos.
That's really, really cool. I mean, your parents, I can't even imagine how they would describe you as a child. I mean, I'm just imagining you now sat there with your decks and your cassettes and all of your books and bits of, paper and pens all around you in a massive whirlwind chaos. Probably much like my own childhood, actually. So obviously you were creative outside of your school, but what were you like as a student?
I was generally quite often in trouble, I'll be honest. Because as most creative people are, your mind wanders, you don't pay attention as much, or you're in your own world of doing stuff. I was very, if it was something we were doing like a creative thing, like if it was like spoken word or drama, or I was really up for it. Maths and like geography, not so much. And back then it was quite well. The humanities were still quite well and thriving. I mean, we had technical drawings, so you had like the big old flip top desks where you could do like proper stuff with huge A4, so A2 sheets of paper and stuff. And we had like DT where you could create things with wood and metal and all that sort of stuff. And then, words, we'd learn very small amounts of poetry, but, do the classic bit of Shakespeare here and there. And then we had a good dramas set up, good music set up. But now when you look at schools now, my girl's going to school and all that stuff has very much been starved and it's shrunken back. So there is very little opportunity for people to try out all different stratas of, creative arts.
That's such a shame. I mean, what advice would you give to young students out there who do have this thirst for creative knowledge?
Unfortunately, it's when I was at university, they had this, I'm not going to swear, but it's FOFO was their mantra, which was F off and find out. So basically it's be in charge of your own creativity, basically. If there's something you're interested in now, because there's the proliferation of stuff on the internet, there's so many resources, just Google whatever you're interested in and then just immerse yourself in it. I mean, other than just like watching a TikTok dance or, something else. I mean, admittedly, that is great fun, but at the same time, try and be a unique and individual and an original person. So, if you're into spoken word, watch Button Poetry or go online and watch an open mic event. If you're into music, saturate yourself in music, and then buy an instrument, even if you don't know how to play it. And then eventually, just by twanging around, you might come up with something nobody's ever heard of before.
I love it. So, can you remember the first time that you ever stepped foot on stage? How did you feel?
Well, I can remember, obviously things like school plays and stuff, that's a different thing because, it's almost like it's by rote. You have to.
It's like a practice ground, isn't it? Yeah.
But I remember the thing that sort of sticks out in my mind when I was, about sort of 13, 14, I went on holiday with a friend of mine. It's one of those classics where family goes on holiday and they're allowed to take a friend each. So me and my friend Shams on holiday, and he and me and him went to this disco, and there was like a talent night at the disco. So it's like one of those caravan club places. And I just got up on stage with no idea what I was going to do, what I was going to perform. I had nothing prepared. I just stepped up on stage. So I saw the microphone, saw the spotlight, and just got up there. And he said he was looking around for me. He said he went off and bought 2 cans of Coke, and he's trying to find out where I was. Turned around, and I was suddenly up on stage trying to do impressions and like tell jokes, and I don't know what I was up to. But yeah, I was up there for about a 5-minute set, got off, didn't come anywhere. But I really enjoyed that whole thrill of throwing myself in the mix.
How did it feel? Like, can you remember how your body felt when you're on stage for the first time?
It's the weirdest thing. It's that trepidation of stepping onto the stage when you're in the wings, when you're out of the spotlight. That's when all the nerves and all the excitement and everything is. As soon as I was on stage, I felt almost like, it was weird, but I felt at home. I felt that this is brilliant. Everyone's looking at me. I've captured this audience for as long as I can hold on to their attention. And I generally was like, you try and do stuff that's going to work, that's going to keep people engaged. As I said, I didn't win or anything, but at the same time, that sense of like, this is really good fun, and that when you came off the exhilaration after performing, that's always stayed with me. So ever since then, I always, in everything I've ever done, I always like to have a bit of this set, which is completely unprepared, completely unrehearsed. I don't know what I'm going to do next, or even I invite like randomness into the set to allow that to happen, because then that's where that real exhilaration comes from, walking that knife edge of not knowing if it's going to work or not.
You're making me feel tense just saying that out loud. Oh my goodness. I'm just trying to remember the first time that I saw you perform, and it was in your band Freshly Squeezed at the time. Imagine like a multi-genre but sort of funky edged bands with a great front man and horn sections and all the rest of it, and then Vegas comes on the stage and basically wraps the socks off the audience, and I was stood there with my mouth open. It was unbelievable, that energy that you bring to the stage. Do you think that it comes from somewhere else, like when you're in the persona of Vegas? Where does that come from?
It's weird. I do sometimes feel like I'm an instrument to the universe. It's just, especially when you're on stage. And I close my eyes and I'm freestyling, because that's one of my favourite things, is to just like go off the top of my head, totally freestyle, rather than do anything rehearsed, just, in the moment. So whatever you see in the audience, whatever you see that's going on, that, you can even ask people to hold things up and incorporate that into a freestyle rap. But I just tend to like go into this it's a weird, like, a cosmic state where you see words like on a travelator coming towards you. And so you just grab them when you need them. And then I find that sometimes I can get into this zone where I can just rap seemingly endlessly, and I don't know where it's all coming from. It's obviously there's a huge repository of words somewhere in my brain where it's just being spat out towards me, and then I've just got this knack of being able to knit them together on the fly sort of thing.
What do you think are sort of like the biggest mistakes that people sort of coming into spoken word? What do you think those big mistakes are that they make initially?
I guess being not yourself, being inauthentic. I think if you see somebody who you really like and then you emulate them, that's great. But you have to emulate them with your own voice, with your own stories, your own experience. If you just try and basically just carbon copy someone, I think then that you're setting yourself up for a failure, because there's no honesty in what you're doing. Like a lot of people I see write stuff maybe for a slam, and they'll write a 3-minute poem that and it becomes very contrived almost. I think you shouldn't limit yourself. So if you want to write a 9-minute opus, write a 9-minute opus. If you want to read a 3-line poem, write a 3-line poem. Just whatever feels right for you, do that. I think you can look at other people for inspiration, but you have to be yourself. That's the biggest pitfall for me, I think, is not being yourself. That inauthenticity is like a real no-no.
Do you find then that's kind of why you separate your personas a little bit when you're emceeing to when you're being poetic?
When I'm on stage as a rapper, there's definitely a different vibe, I guess. I'm much more shouty and leery, and I'm prepared to take the mick out of the crowd and be much more confrontational, perhaps, but in a sort of jovial way. I'm not like a offensive, but when I'm a rapper, when I'm a poet, I'm much more honest and open, and try and make a genuine emotional connection with what I'm saying to the audience. And also there's a real difference, because obviously when you're in a band, 98% of the people are listening to the band and just like nodding their heads, having a drink, talking amongst themselves. Some of them are listening to what's going on vocally, but not all of them. Whereas when it's spoken word, everything's stripped away and it's just you and your voice.
Does that make you feel a bit more nervous, a bit more vulnerable?
I think it does, but at the same time, it makes you feel like you've captured some people's attention. There's nowhere else to, I mean, if you start like chatting amongst yourselves in a poetry event, then people just turn around and like they're snippy about it because you're not focused on what's going on in the room. And I think that a lot of people find that very rude if people start talking amongst themselves if you're at a poetry event. So there's definitely this case of it's a very warm and inviting audience. Everyone's generally they're open to see what you've got to say. So that enables you to take risks, enables you to be a bit more open and honest than you perhaps would be. I've said things on stage that I probably wouldn't say in like polite conversation. I've said stuff that I've revealed secrets, I've revealed like traumas and stuff that I don't normally talk about, but because you're in this sort of this womb of acceptance, you sort of get away with saying all sorts of things.
Talking of being sort of received for what you're giving in your vulnerability, I mean, when does your inspiration hit? Because I know that for me personally, it's a weird thing. I imagine the poems sort of a little bit like you said, being a vessel for the universe. I imagine words and things sort of circling around my head. And when they decide, not when I decide, when they decide, they shoot down into my brain. And if I don't capture them there and then, they're gone forever. Yeah. Do you find the same thing?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I'll it's normally like just the second your eyes are just about to get to sleep, suddenly you get a whole stanza pops into your brain. Or you could be mining underground, or your hands are covered in tapas. You're just like, I can't write this down. I haven't got a pen. Oh God! And then you just got the rest of the day. People are talking to you, and you're just in the back of your mind is circling that one line around again. I've got to remember this. Got to remember this. Which is I've written a poem about that actually, about that whole thing about a poem could strike.
Do you have it here?
Possibly, yeah.
Let's have a little look. Yay!
It's called Hold That Thought, and actually it's the first poem at the start of my book, which is coming out, because it sums up the whole thing we're talking about. When a poem hits you, you need to be ready for it. It's called Hold That Thought. If you're buried by an avalanche, or on a derailed train, trapped in a mine or eating tapas in Spain, jostled by drunks in a pub watching sport, a poem could strike. So hold that thought. If you're tied wrists and ankles to a four-poster bed, mountain climbing the Eiger, a sumo sat on your head, being cross-examined by a lawyer in court, a poem could strike. So hold that thought. If you're captured by ISIS or having sex with your boss, in a dinghy that's sinking, or trying out dental floss, wrestling a rhino in a vat filled with port, a poem could strike. So hold that thought. If you're sat at a writing desk, ornately carved, a pen and some foolscap neatly folded in half, all the time in the world in an idyllic resort, nothing, absolutely nothing.
That was brilliant. I need to give you a clap. Yeah. Here's your lone clap for the day.
Fair enough.
Wow. And that's exactly what it's like. I was trying so hard not to laugh through that because obviously recording, but yeah, absolutely brilliant. What do you think drives you to create? What's that motivation to be creative?
I think it's, otherwise, what is life about? I mean, I hate to be too dour, but if you start, as a baby and then you get to, old age, hopefully, and shuffle off this mortal coil, and in between, you haven't created anything. You haven't created anything original or not, try to, express yourself. Then it's almost like a life wasted for me. I feel that, every day, even if I'm just jotting down a couple of lines of nonsense, or if I'm writing an epic poem, or if I'm, there's so much stuff I've done that it's just been lost to the ethers. I mean, especially when I do like freestyle stuff when I'm emceeing and things. If I'm in a jam with a load of musicians and you just in that moment create something which is amazing and epic, and then it's just gone. It doesn't matter. It's not worthless because it's just gone. That's something really important, very human, very like primal about that. You've created something and you've given it out to the universe, and I feel that that's. For me, if I didn't do that, I'd go insane. I definitely need to have this. It doesn't even need to be to an audience, but it needs to just be me coming up with something and being creative. I I don't know why, it's just this burning desire in there, you know. And if I've tried to do the 9 to 5 boring job thing, and I literally nearly went insane. I mean, the worst job ever was worked on a production line in a tin factory. And all I had to do was turn a tin over from upside down to the right way up, so the next guy could put the lid on. For 8 hours a day. Did that for 4 weeks, and then I actually did go slightly insane because there was no room for you to be creative. And then when you got home, you just really knackered, and that was the worst thing in the world. So that's why I tried to, when I moved to a new town, I always try and find a band to play with, or I try and find like a scene to get involved with, because that's, you need to have this like burning kernel inside you that, that wants to go out there and do things. How do you inspire that in your kids? I think by not imposing limits, by not if somebody's interested in something, just throw a bit more kindling onto that fire. If when my little girl Goldie, she used to be really interested in dancing, so we made sure that she joined a dance troupe and did whatever she wanted to do. She wants to dance around the house, she wants to dress up as a rainbow fairy. Fair enough, I'll join in. When she was interested in music, so we made sure we got her a keyboard, we got a mic, so she could. Most of the time she just stood in the mirror just miming stuff, but she's still expressing herself and getting a persona. So I think that's important, is just not to undervalue. But if somebody wants to be creative, it's not something that, as you said before, which is like seemed as like the government say that it's non-viable, it's not important. It's really important. It's like the heart of what being human is all about. So I think if you can encourage that, if you can give them the tools to try and be creative. I mean, I know, financially it might be a problem to buy a software or whatever. At the same time, there are ways of, a pen and paper isn't expensive. A dress-up box of stuff of old guff that you've accumulated. Everyone's got stuff that they've accumulated over the years. If you want to, create, everything, just be in there. Just allow that to happen. Just help sort of cultivate that idea of imagination and creativity. And that's the only way you can do it, is just allow it to thrive. I mean, you mentioned the government in that comment, and it's such a sensitive subject, isn't it, at the moment, the pandemic, and how it's affecting people's lives. And I know that you were due to have a book published, weren't you? Yeah. Tell me about that. It's a bit of a gutter, but at the same time, it's not completely mothballed. I spoke to my publisher the other day, and she's really keen. It's going to come out soon, but it's a book called Miscellany of One. This is basically a compilation of poems I've written over the last 5 years, and because I'm not quite a scattergun sort of brain. I write a poem about my dog one day, the next day it'll be about world politics, next day it'll be about something like about nature, or they're all they're very anecdotal. They don't really sort of fit into one genre. So we created this idea of a book which is like a miscellany of all these different books. And Emma, the publisher, has got this great connection with letterpress. So every single poem is going to be letterpressed. So it'll look beautiful as well. It'll look beautiful and hopefully be really nice and tactile. And each page will look unique. And because of that, obviously you have to be in a certain space to be able to lay out the letters and get access to the printing machines. And that was originally in Plymouth. That got closed down because of the pandemic, so therefore everything got pushed back. But she's now got hold of other printing presses. She set up her own print studio, so we're going to hopefully have it out by end of this year. The first run's been done for it, so hopefully we'll probably launch it in the spring, I should think. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that coming out. I'm really, really excited about it. I can't wait to get a signed copy myself. I have to sort of divulge a little bit more into this pandemic situation. How are you coping? Because I know that obviously you are a performer in every sense of the word, and I relate to that. What have you done to survive creatively in this time? So I set it upon myself, right, okay, I'm going to write a poem a day during lockdown. So I did a poem a day, and I ended up writing 70 poems back to back, day after day. Wow! and performed each one onto camera, put it out on my Facebook page, and then sort of here and there spread it around elsewhere. But that's generally on Facebook. And and then on Fridays I would do a freestyle Friday. So I'd just open up put it live, let people just send me comments, like write a poem about this, and so I just weave in what was in the comments, and as I say, just that whole idea of throwing yourself off a cliff edge and seeing where you land. So that's what I did, and that kept me going for that first bit of lockdown. Other than that, I started investigating carpentry. I thought there's something I could do. So I had a massive list of jobs that I've been putting off for years and years and years. So I decided, like, I'll fix the shed roof. And then fixing the shed roof turned into, I'm going to build a bar. And then I'm going to build a garage. And then, so by day I was writing poems. And then as the sun was out, I was doing loads of stuff with saws and drills in the garden. So I just sort of, and then did loads and loads of walking. That's one thing I hadn't done, because I've got a dog. So me and her would just go and sort of maraud. And then you come back sort of filled with loads of ideas to write more stuff. So I just kept myself going rather than sort of hunker down. I tried to do as much as I could to get out and about.
Do you think that kind of saved your mental health? I mean, do you lean on your creativity anyway to help with that?
Yeah, I think there is definitely some catharsis that comes from being creative. I mean, I tend to see that if people sort of hold on to anger, or if they hold on to grief, or if they hold on to negative thoughts, then that tends to fester and become a really sort of embodiment within themselves. Whereas if you are able to get that out of you, you're able to like exercise those things and have the catharsis of it. For me, getting it out and getting it down on a page, even if nobody else is ever going to read it, it feels like I've exercised myself of that, and then I can move on. So sometimes, that ability to explore negativity in a way that you can get it out of yourself can become a positive experience.
I want to take you back to Glastonbury.
Oh, yeah. Please do.
If only we could be there. So, Jason, you've performed at Glastonbury. I mean, can you remember what that was like for the first time?
Yeah, that was awesome. It was. I loved it with being a bigger stage, but that's always the way. We were on the bandstand stage the first time we played. And there was a sea of people just who either just seen The Cure or didn't want to see any more of The Cure. And it came this huge stream of humanity came past us just as we were starting up. So it was the perfect time to play. And then a load of people stopped, and the load of people got more and more people. And yes, we did our first set as Antimatador to Glastonbury. That was really good. But also because it's Glastonbury, you're there for 3 or 4 days. So I went to the open mic tent as well, and I did some open mic, and I entered the Glastonbury Slams. So I got to do some spoken word while I was there as well. So that was real nice to perform in both sort of stratas of my sort of online presence, my sort of on-stage presences, like MC Vegas, but also I'd stood up and did a poem about my dog as Jason Butler, and then one about my wife, which is one of my favourites. And it was like a real nice mixture of both. So I got to see some great music acts, but I also got to, perform in all my various guises, which was really good.
How does it feel different performing with a band to performing alone?
Well, performing alone, there's no safety net. You can't sort of just have a little 5 minutes off and just stare into the distance and think about things while the guitarist takes an epic solo or the drummer's holding it down. But then again, there's a certain amount of energy that comes from playing with a band. There is a huge uplift. That sense of energy. And all you can do then is as a vocalist is just try and ride above that. So obviously your sense of energy inside is even more. But when it's just you and the mic and a crowd of people and nothing else. It's a different energy, but you have all that same focused power, but just you and a mic. So you can spread out the words a bit more. You can have a bit more soulfulness. You can have a bit more thought and maybe a bit more deliberation over what you say. And you can afford to be melancholy. You can afford to. Whereas when it's with a band, generally people are there to have a good time. I mean, unless you're Radiohead or something, you want to play like a particularly downbeat track,
deep and meaningful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but in every band I've ever been in, we're not hugely deep and meaningful. We're always trying to get people to throw themselves around, or at least have a good time.
So, talk to me a little bit about Antimatador, because do you still go out as Freshly Squeezed as well, or is it just pure Antimatador now?
Freshly Squeezed was the first band that we were all playing in, mm-hmm. And then Freshly Squeezed, because we're doing covers, you're playing stuff, which you haven't written. We always put our own twist on it. I mean, obviously, a lot of the tracks we do, if you're going to do a R&B number, it generally doesn't have a rap section in it. So we always weaved in like an instrumental rap section, or we'll take an old tune and upgrade it. But it still felt like the originality came from how we played it, the arrangements, as opposed to the content. And so Antimatador was us trying to write our own stuff, and it just didn't fit in like that. The sort of funk, soul, hip hop vibe that we had in Freshly Squeezed didn't necessarily fit what the music we were creating as a group, because there's like 8 of us. Well, there was at the time 8 of us in the band. Everyone's got their own musical influences, and so what came out was this real sort of what I'd like to call genre fluid sort of vibe, where we called it future sound. I don't know what I'll leave that to the other people to think of, but essentially it doesn't really fit in that genre. So we created Antimatador to cover those bases, and then there was like a weird schism where Freshly and Antimatador definitely became 2 separate things, and then Antimatador, we got to a point where we're ready to release an album, ready to like put out singles and that sort of stuff, and then we had a change of singer, and then we didn't have a singer for a bit, and then we had another shuffle of and it just never seemed to be the right time. Nothing ever clicked into place, and now, like 4 years after we've recorded the album, we're at Middle Farm Studios, we're finally putting the album out, because we've had to like do overdubs and redo bits and get new. So it's finally we're at the point where like we've got to put this out, otherwise it's what's the point doing it? So so the Antimatador album coming out on November the 10th, 2020, and it's an opus. It's a really weird thing to describe. It's like the first track is like a straight up hip hop track. Second one has like got rock, jazz, drum and bass. There's like techno in ones. There's some amazing like ethereal vocals. We've got Jacob Calladine doing a beautiful song called The Owl, which is and it's this floaty like high pitched vocal over it's a real. It's a bit like my poetry. It's like every single track it could be from a different band, and that's what we like about it. It's just this whole idea of a collective sound that creates this one whole, as opposed to like that's them the same thing track
you
up.
You can't be niched.
Yeah, exactly.
I've always loved that about your band. How did you come up with the name Antimatador? Can you remember where you were when that was the decision?
Yeah, we'd had ages of trying to fight out what name we should call ourselves, and I remember we got to this point where we thought, well, a bit like a poetry slam. Everyone wrote down what their favourite names were. We put them in 2 big piles of paper. We ripped them all up, put them in the go. So it was like, Goldfinch versus Monkey Biscuit, and Matador was one of the last ones. But then we thought Matador's got like a real negative connotation, but it's just a really powerful, strong word. And then Dan Hillman, our saxophonist, said, yeah, but the problem is if we meet a band called Antimatador, then we might cause a rift in the space-time continuum, and the whole world might just fold in on itself. And then, because he was playing off the idea of matter and antimatter, and then that just like ping. So we typed Antimatador into Google, and there's no other Antimatador apart from there's one. I think there's some sort of anti-tank device called an Antimatador. So that works just as well. So yeah, so we thought, sod it, we're going to clump onto our Antimatador. So that's where it came from. And
lo and behold, it was born.
Yeah.
How do you see the world differently as a consequence of your performing and writing?
Everything's a excuse for writing a poem, I think. It doesn't matter how bad it is, I could write a poem about that, or how great it is, I could write a poem about that. I don't necessarily. I used to write lyrics more when I was younger, like sort of up to, I don't know, about 5-10 years ago. I always thought of things as lyrics. Now I always think of things as poems, and I really enjoy now all the training I've had for years and years and years as an MC has now fed into what I write as a poet. So I've got that same sort of drive for rhythm and stuff and for rhyme, but it gives me an opportunity to write about whatever I want to write about.
That's awesome. I love that. If you were to go back in time and meet 10-year-old Jason, do you think he'd be proud of who you are now?
I think he'd be really glad that I shut up, because I was literally the second shortest in our year, and we did have a guy who had dwarfism in our year, so I was pretty short. And I was really keen to make a noise and be out there, and I always pictured myself as maybe doing some music or whatever. But now if I told him, when you get to my age, you'll be fine. You've performed here, you've been on TV, you've been on radio, you've done all the things you wanted to do. Don't worry, it's all good. I was always worried at 10 that actually at 10 I wasn't worried. It was when I became a teenager and everyone else was like 6 foot taller than me and really hairy, and I was like Gollum amongst people. And you got like these Sasquatch boys when you're getting changed after PE, and then there's this little skinny Gollum in the corner. He's like 3'1". It wasn't brilliant, but when I was 10, I literally thought I was going to become Luke Skywalker, and I could rebuild the world in Lego. I wasn't bothered about much, but so I mean, even if he saw me, I reckon even if he saw me, that would be me, wouldn't it? So if there was some weird way that we could talk to each other, I think I'd be quite chuffed that he's got a bit of a beard and he's tall and he seems quite all right. He's not. I think I'd be happy with that. And the fact that I can tell him I'm still into Star Wars, even though I'm nearly 50, I think he'd be well chuffed.
I have to describe the T-shirt that Jason's wearing right now. It is a take on Mr. Miyagi, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a take on Mr. Miyagi, but imagine Mr. Miyagi is Yoda, and he's got chopsticks in his hands, and he's basically, I mean, he's taking down the what are they called? The
TIE fighters.
TIE fighters.
Yeah. So because obviously in Karate Kid, which is another great film that I loved when I was a kid, he says a man who can capture a fly with a chopstick can accomplish anything. So Yoda can catch a TIE fighter with a chopstick, so therefore he can also accomplish anything.
Love it. Oh, we're coming to the end of the interview, and I'm really, really sad because I've loved listening to you as always. So I have to ask you, what do you consider to be your bravest moment or moments?
I've always considered just putting yourself out there. My favourite thing in the world is to challenge myself by not having a plan. As you probably can tell from this interview, that I generally like to throw myself out there and see what happens, rather than I've never been, as I said it in the intro, that there's a whole thing about fail to prepare and prepare to fail. So if you imagine you've been given a chance to stand up on a stage in front of potentially 1,000 people. Generally, you like to have an idea of what's going to happen. I like to not have an idea of what's going to happen. I like to ask the audience, okay, what do you want this next song to be about, or this next poem to be about? And then between us, we discover what happens next. And that could go terribly wrong or terribly right. 98% of the time it goes terribly right because everyone's with you, because they're part of that experience. But sometimes it does go terribly wrong. But that's also a learning experience. That's also, you can turn that into a bit of fun. But yeah, generally I like to stand up in front of a crowd of people and just go for it and see what happens. And without the safety net, I think once you haven't got a safety net, then that makes you, if that whole that adrenaline from performing is massively sort of spiked by the idea that this is knife edge stuff. I've got to get this right, but at the same time, it's fun as well. You've got to keep that balance.
I love that. What parting advice would you give to those people that are listening to this now, going, "Wow, you know what? I've got the confidence now to maybe try spoken word." What advice would you give them in terms of, how can they educate themselves and how can they get themselves out there?
Well, weirdly, when I first started, I used to do a night called Rhyme Warp in the Barbican Theatre, and my main ethos that was to get people who've never performed before to perform. And you've got to understand that when you perform a spoken word open mic night, for example, people aren't there to judge you unless it's a slam. But people aren't there to necessarily give any sort of negative vibes. You'll find it's the most warm and encouraging environment you could ever stand up. You could stand up and shakily with a piece of paper go through your first poem, and I guarantee you'll get a massive round of applause because they understand what it is to take that first step in the threshold of becoming a poet and becoming a spoken word performer. So if that's what you want to do, then all you need to do is do it. Just be confident in your own voice, be confident in your own poems. Because the thing is, you'll write a poem, and your first poem is never going to be your best poem unless you're really lucky. But you need to have it heard, have it read, discuss it with people, and also listen to other people as well. If you want to write a poem, my first poetry experience was to sit in a crowd, watch some amazing poets, and think, bloody hell, I could do that. And then somebody then saying, "You got any poems? Do you want to go and do one?" And then taking that step to just put your foot on the stage and say it, that first opening line, and you'll be at home. Honestly, you'll feel like you're at home.
Oh, that's such great advice. I love it. Finally, which poets do you think people, if they're starting out with poetry and they're a bit like, "Oh, I don't know what this poetry malarkey is about," which poets would you recommend they started with?
I was most blown away when I saw Kate Tempest. I saw her at Glastonbury, and I've seen her quite a few times online. But the sheer veracity of her poems are amazing. Also, Holly McNish. I've performed with her a few times. But I also, I mean, people. You'll find that a lot of poets these days are much more accessible. I think when I was at school, poetry was very much here's William Wordsworth, here's John Donne. Which, I mean, not they're great poets, but at the same time, there seems like a real sort of linguistic barrier. Whereas if you can find people who have the same sort of vernacular as you, they speak in the same way. I mean, obviously, in the current scene, there's a massive strata of people who are influenced by hip hop, through to people who are just writing in their own voice. I mean, like George the Poet, for example, Danny Pandolfini, aka Craft D. You've got Vanessa Kisule. Oh, she's amazing. I've seen her a few times. She's an absolute tour de force on stage. But the person who first got me to really want to get up on stage is a guy called Johnny Fluffy Punk. And he's hilarious. And he did things like he'd start reading a poem, then halfway through stop and go off on a little tangent, talk about some stuff, then come back and finish off his poem again. And he was really just broke down what I expected the poet to be. There was no po-facedness. Chris Redmond, Tung Fu. I mean, that was amazing. And then again, they play with that whole idea of improvisation, which is for me is really integral to performing. But I think the best thing to do is if you're not a big reader, because some people aren't big readers, then just go to open mic nights. I've gone to open mic nights and come away with like a couple of lines after hearing somebody do a whole poet that might be 60-year-old bloke from Exeter, who shuffles out to every open mic night, but actually he has a few absolute gems in there. Those are people like Robert Garnham, James Turner, Tim King. These people who run these great open mic nights, go along, and then that's how you'll get inspired to write, I think.
Talking of inspiration, and being that it's in our final throes of the interview, will you please give our listeners another poem? This one is about a Sunday roast dinner that I had with my family many, many years ago when I was 15, and it turned into an absolute debauched nonsenseness. It's called Classic Family Roast. It was a classic family roast. Nana and Grandad Butler, the hosts, their 4 sons with wives and children in tow, a few in-laws, not sure where we're all going to go, tables dragged together in an uneven topology, seats squeezed side by side, scant regard for elbow room, mismatched plates, random knives and forks. We've emptied out the cutlery drawer. Meats, potatoes, pots of veg, enough to fill up hollow legs, passed around by the handles or slopped out in ladles. Pints of beer, glasses of wine like dominoes in a precarious line. And around mouthfuls of food, the grown-ups start debating, gesticulating laden forks, gruff pontificating. And when all the dishes are doled out and nobody's waiting, the whole table settles down for en masse masticating. All truffing in a cacophony of clinking plates and cutlery, slurps and burps, a messy feast with no finesse or subtlety. Once eating sounds simmer down to a palatable roar, my grandad seizes the moment as he has some fun in store. He clears his throat pointedly, raises his fork, and points at me and asks, "Jason, you'll know this. Can you tell me what those flavoured condoms are for?" The table drops to a hush, a momentary peace, the only noise a dull cascade from a stalled forkful of peas. I'm a virginal 15, but still know a thing or two. My jaw frozen closed, mouth full with half-chewed food. I make a point as if I'm just trying to find the right words, a tiny pause to cover the fact this is entirely absurd. I can feel my cheeks reddening. My palms are getting clammy. Every eye is trained on me from every member of the family. Then Nana Owen pipes up. She's all pearl necklace and perm, the in-law matriarch, straight-laced and firm. Usually disapproving, prim and proper, well-to-do, not backward in coming forward when she had a point to prove. She interjects, "Is it for that, deep throat?"
Everyone's reaction was exactly the same. Like Formula One victors gushing champagne, in unison a chorus line of grotesque spit takes, regurgitated morsels spray on one another's plates, gravy spittle dripping off each other's faces, peas appear in nostrils and other unexpected places, greens between the cleavage of Nana's ample breast, red wine constellation flecked the shirt of Grandad's chest, cabbage on the mirror, bits of sausage in the hearth. I'm sure some food flew out the window, littering the garden path. A second of silence, and then we laugh, as if it's going out of fashion. Unfettered, no hesitation. Auntie Sue needs resuscitation. Choking cousin slaps on backs, a giggling, messy aftermath. Now, all those grandparents are gone. The uncles are estranged. I can't even call back all the cousins' names. All those bonds are gone now. And it's a shame, but to the memory, I'll still smile and raise a toast, regardless. It was a classic family roast.
Sensational. I think we can all relate to that. So, Jason, just to finish off now, if people are interested in your work or they're interested in the band, where can they find you online?
Well, if you type in Antimatador online, we're the only ones, so we're currently making a big splash on social media, so there's lots of stuff going out there at the moment just before the album. Freshly Squeezed, freshlysqueezed.com. Jason Butler Poet, which is just, as you can find on Facebook. And then I've got a website, jason.butler.io, and I'm on Instagram at Old Man Vegas. If you type in Old Man Vegas, all one word, you'll find me, because I'm pretty much the only Old Man Vegas around. And fingers crossed, hold out for Miscellany of One. I'll make a lot of noise when it's nearly off the presses, and I'll let you know.
Thank you so much for being here today. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
It has been an absolute pleasure to spend time with Jason today. His passion for his art shines through in every thought-out sentence, and yet in contrast, he is happy to set foot onto a stage and see what comes to him in the moment. That to me is the epitome of a brave existence, purposefully putting yourself in the way of fear or failure and knowing with complete faith that you will find something creative, that the moment is there for the taking and it's your choice how you enter into it and what the outcome will be. How many of us self-sabotage these moments of potential, be it through procrastination, which is essentially the fear of beginning, or through perfectionism and not wanting to finish a piece so you don't have to appear foolish or wrong if it isn't liked. Better not to begin or finish at all than to be out there to be judged, right? But like Jason says, it's better to try and fail than fail to try. I like that he doesn't limit himself to a certain style or structure. He is curious about all he sees, like a photographer, capturing moments around a dinner table, and yet in contrast will happily write a political piece expressing his thoughts on the hottest topics, which goes to prove that poetry is limitless, that every thought can lead to a piece of tangible art if you give it the space to grow. So maybe we need to take our inspirations, however small, and run with them. Write them down, put them up, speak them out loud, and be brave enough to invite opinions on our work, be it through friends or open mic nights or online events, so that we can grow in our creation process and also as a person. Like everything in life, the more we practice, the more we develop our passions into defined and tangible skills. And just as William Faulkner once said, get it down, take chances. It may be bad, but it's the only way you can do anything really good. Join us again next week when we speak to Cornish foraging expert Vix Hill Ryder from the famous family foraging kitchen. We talk about sustainable eating, foraging simple plants from the hedgerow and seashore, and some great tips on how to whip up a free dinner from your garden. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the show. If you have a spare moment now, please like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts in a review, which will really help other people like yourself to find the show. Of course, you can also share with your friends and follow us at the Brave Moment Podcast 2020 on Instagram or the Brave Moment Podcast on Facebook. If you're interested in getting in touch, pop on over to the therapy page Coping to Mastery on Facebook or via the website copingtomastery.org. It's been so wonderful to have you all here with me again. Please get in touch with the show with your own stories, and don't forget, your brave moment starts now.